The wind had teeth. Qhorin felt them bite through wool and leather as he led what remained of his ranging party through the mountain pass. 8 days ago they had been 12. Now they were 9, and 2 of those would likely not see another sunrise. Behind him, Dalbridge stumbled. The older ranger caught himself against a snow-crusted boulder, his breath coming in wet, rattling gasps. Frostbite had claimed 3 of his fingers 2 days past. The black had spread to his palm. Despite the Meister's teachings, Qhorin had tried to remember. Stone Snake moved to help him, but Qhorin raised his maimed right hand in warning. They could not afford to slow. The Shadow Tower lay 3 days south. They had food for 1. "Keep moving," Qhorin said. His voice carried no warmth, no encouragement, just fact. The wind swallowed his words, but the men understood. They always understood Qhorin Halfhand. He hated that they did. The pass narrowed ahead, black stone pressing close on either side. Qhorin's eyes, grey as the winter sky, swept the heights. Wildlings rarely ventured this deep into the Frostfangs during the cold season, but rarely was not never. His left hand rested on his sword hilt, the fingers that remained to him flexing against the worn leather grip. The right hand, missing the last 2 fingers and half the third, hung at his side. Useless for swordwork now, useful enough for other things, like counting the dead. Halfhand. Stone Snake moved up beside him, keeping his voice low. The younger ranger's face was windburned and hollow with exhaustion, but his eyes stayed sharp. Good. Qhorin had chosen him for this ranging because he thought before he spoke. Dalbridge can't make the climb at Icemark Ridge. Neither can Beren. Qhorin did not look back at the 2 struggling men. He had already made his assessment at dawn, when Dalbridge could not grip his bow, and Beren had coughed blood into the snow. "I know," he said. Stone Snake waited. When Qhorin offered nothing more, the younger man's jaw tightened. We could stay with them," Qhorin interrupted, his voice flat. "Share what food remains. Watch them die slowly instead of quickly. Then die ourselves, and Lord Dennis never learns what we saw beyond the Milkwater." The words sat between them like corpses. 7 save us," Stone Snake muttered, though he served at the Shadow Tower, where the old gods held more sway than the new. "Is that what command means? Choosing who dies?" Qhorin finally looked at him. The younger ranger flinched from whatever he saw in those grey eyes. "Yes," Qhorin said simply, "it is." They made camp in a shallow cave as the sun died behind the mountains. There was no wood for a fire, so they huddled together for warmth, 9 men pressed close as brothers in the womb. The smell of unwashed bodies, old blood, and fear filled the small space. Qhorin sat apart, near the cave mouth where the wind could reach him. He preferred the cold to the smell of dying men. Dalbridge lasted until midnight. The infection took him with fever dreams, muttering about his wife in Molestown and a son he had not seen in 3 years. The men listened in silence as his voice faded to nothing. Stone Snake checked for breath, then met Qhorin's eyes across the darkness. 1 more lost. They could not bury him. The ground was frozen iron, and they had no strength to spare for digging. Instead, they dragged him outside and covered him with stones, a ranger's cairn, unmarked and unmourned. The wildlings would not disturb it. Even they respected the dead. When they returned to the cave, Beren was awake and watching. "I won't make it," he said. No question in his voice. He had been a ranger for 20 years. He knew the count same as Qhorin did. "Leave me here. Take my share of the food." "No," said Hagen, one of the younger men. "We don't abandon brothers." Qhorin said nothing. He was rationing out the last of their salt pork, dividing it with a precision that would have impressed a Meister. Each man received a piece no larger than 2 fingers. It would keep them alive 1 more day, perhaps 2, if they were lucky, and the wind did not turn. Beren watched him work. The older ranger's face was grey, his lips cracked and bleeding, but his eyes stayed clear. "How many, Halfhand?" he asked quietly. Qhorin did not look up from his counting. "How many what?" "How many men have you left behind?" The other rangers fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting for his answer. Qhorin finished dividing the meat. He held up his right hand, showing the stumps where his fingers had been. "More than I have fingers left to count," he said, "and I had 10 once." He passed out the portions. When he reached Beren, he placed the man's share in his palm and closed the ranger's fingers around it. "Eat," Qhorin said. "You're not dead yet." They left before dawn. Beren could not walk, so 2 men carried him on a makeshift litter of cloaks and deadwood they had found near the cave. It slowed them, but Qhorin didn't order them to stop. Not yet. The mathematics of survival were simple. Brutal, but simple. They had perhaps 40 miles to the Shadow Tower. A healthy man could make 10 miles a day in these mountains, maybe 12 if he pushed. But they were not healthy. 8 miles a day, Qhorin estimated. 5 days if nothing went wrong. Everything always went wrong. By midday, Beren was unconscious. By afternoon, he was dead. They built another cairn. Smaller this time, they had less strength to spare for stones. Qhorin spoke no words over the body. The Night's Watch had no prayers for the dead, only vows for the living. He stood for a moment in the howling wind, looking down at the pile of rocks, and thought about the first man he had left behind. His name had been Jarman Buckwell's nephew. Qhorin couldn't remember the boy's first name anymore. That bothered him more than the nightmares. "Move out," he said. They moved. The next 2 days blurred together, in a haze of cold and exhaustion. Qhorin led them through passes he had memorized on a dozen rangings, navigating by instinct and the position of peaks against the sky. The stars helped at night, when clouds permitted. The old bear had taught him that, Jor Mormont, before he became Lord Commander, when he still ranged beyond the wall himself. "The stars don't lie," Mormont had said. "Men do, the cold does, but the stars stay true." Qhorin trusted the stars. He did not trust the silence. On the 3rd day, Stone Snake noticed it too. They were descending through a pine forest, black trees skeletal with ice, when the younger ranger stopped and cocked his head. "No birds," Stone Snake said. Qhorin had been waiting for someone to notice. "No," he agreed. "No tracks either. No rabbits, no elk, nothing." Stone Snake's hand drifted to his bow. "Forest this size should have game." "Should," Qhorin said. He kept walking. Behind them, the other rangers muttered uneasily. Hagen made a warding sign, the old way, fingers pressed to forehead and heart. Men who served at the Shadow Tower kept more to the old gods than those at Castle Black, where southern knights and their 7 gods held sway. But even the old gods seemed far away in these mountains. "What did that, Halfhand?" asked Blaine, a thick-shouldered ranger from the stony Dornish marches. "What drives out all the game?" Qhorin did not answer immediately. He had his suspicions, born from tales told by old men in the Shadow Tower's common hall, stories dismissed as legend by meisters and fools. but he had seen things on this ranging that troubled him. Wildling camps abandoned in haste, livestock slaughtered, but not eaten, and once, far to the north, a silence so deep it felt like drowning. "Something that hunts better than we do," he said finally. That satisfied no one, but no one asked again. They reached the Shadow Tower on the evening of the 5th day. 9 had left. 7 returned. The men at the gate called out in relief when they saw black cloaks stumbling through the drifts. Rangers rushed forward with furs and wineskins, questions tumbling out. "Where are the others? What happened? Did you find the wildlings?" Qhorin pushed through them without answering. He made his way directly to the rookery, climbed the winding stair, despite legs that threatened to fold beneath him, and found Maester Mullin among his birds. "Lord Commander Mormont," Qhorin said. His voice was hoarse from days of wind and silence. "Send a raven. Tell him I need to speak with him." Mullin took in Qhorin's appearance, the frostbite on his cheeks, the hollowness of his eyes, the way he favoured his left side where something had struck him during the avalanche. "You should rest," the maester said. "Eat. The report can wait." "Now," Qhorin said. Mullin's mouth thinned, but he reached for parchment and quill. "What should I write?" Qhorin closed his eyes. He could still see them in the darkness behind his eyelids. 12 men riding, north, full of duty and determination. The 2 he had left dying in the pass. The 3 who had fallen to cold and misfortune. The mathematics of survival, written in frozen corpses. "Tell him we found the wildling camps," Qhorin said. "Abandoned. Something's moving beyond the wall, driving them south. Something old." He opened his eyes. "Tell him winter is coming, and it's bringing things we don't have words for yet." The maester's hand hesitated. "Qhorin? That sounds like—" "Madness?" Qhorin's laugh was bitter as ash. "Perhaps. Write it anyway." He left before the master could argue. The stairs seemed steeper on the way down, the shadows longer. In the yard below, he could see his rangers being tended to. Hot food, warm fires, questions from men who still thought ranging beyond the wall was glorious. Let them think it. They would learn. Qhorin made his way to the armory instead. The room was empty, cold, smelling of oil and iron. He sank onto a bench and stared at his right hand in the lamplight, 3 fingers remaining. He flexed them slowly, testing their strength. The wildling who had taken the others had been a woman, tall, hard-eyed, fighting with an axe she wielded like a lover. Qhorin had killed her, but not before she had destroyed his sword hand. The Meister at the Shadow Tower had wanted to take the whole hand. Qhorin had refused. A man with one hand was useless beyond the wall. A man with half a hand was merely crippled. He had learned to fight again, learned to grip a sword with 3 fingers and rage instead of 5, and certainty. It had taken 2 years of practice until he could hold his own against the best rangers. Another year until he could best them. The wildlings had started calling him Halfhand, as an insult. The Night's Watch made it a title. Now he sat in an empty armory, counting the ghosts he had added to his collection. Jarman Buckwell's nephew, whose first name he could not recall. Dolbridge, muttering of his wife. Baron, accepting death without complaint. And the 2 in the pass, dying slowly while 7 walked away. "This is what command means," he had told Stone Snake. "Choosing who dies." He had not told the younger ranger the rest of it, that you carry every choice in the spaces between your fingers, that you count them in the darkness when sleep will not come, That duty and honour were warm words men used when they wanted to feel better about the necessary murders that kept the realm safe. The Night's Watch was the shield that guards the realms of men, but shields were made of iron and ice, not glory, and someone had to hold the shield, even when it cut your hands to bone. Qhorin sat alone in the armoury until the lamp burned low. Then he stood, checked his sword out of habit, and made his way to the common hall. The men would want to see him. They would want to hear the story, sanitized and heroic, of the ranging beyond the milkwater. He would give them the version they needed, the one without mathematics. Outside, the wind scraped against the Shadow Tower's stones. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the wall, things older than memory stirred and moved. Wildlings fled before them, driven south by terror they could not name, and the Night's Watch, outnumbered and undersupplied, prepared to meet whatever was coming with 7,000 years of duty, and not enough men to hold the wall. Qhorin Halfhand knew the mathematics of that too. They were grim. The wildling's blood steamed in the snow. Qhorin watched it spread, a dark bloom against white, and knew they had made a mistake. Not in killing the man. He had been reaching for his horn when Stone Snake's arrow took him through the throat, but in being seen at all. Outrider, Blaine said, crouching beside the body. He turned the dead man's hand, showing the calluses. See the marks? He's been riding hard. Recent, too. Qhorin nodded. They were 4 days beyond the milkwater, deeper into wildling territory than any ranging party had ventured in 3 years. Lord Commander Mormont's orders had been specific. Find out why the clans are moving. Find out what they're running from. So far, they had found only abandoned camps and the occasional outrider like this one, scouts for larger groups moving south. Strip him, Qhorin said. See what he carries. While Blaine and Hagen worked, Qhorin studied the surrounding forest. Pine and sentinel trees, their branches heavy with snow. The silence here was different from the unnatural quiet they had encountered on the last ranging. Here, he could hear the wind moving through needles, the distant cry of a hawk. Life still existed in these woods. That should have comforted him. Somehow, it did not. Halfhand, Stone Snake held up a leather cord strung with carved bone tokens. Hornfoot clan markings, and this, he showed a wineskin, still half full. He was heading back to a camp, soon. Qhorin took the wineskin, unstoppered it, sniffed. Sour wine, the kind wildlings made from berries and desperation. The dead man had been resupplying, which meant his people were close enough to reach within a day. How many in his party, you think? Qhorin asked. Stone Snake studied the tracks in the snow. He was alone when he died, but see here. He pointed to older impressions, half filled with fresh powder. 3 horses passed this way yesterday, maybe 4, all heading west toward the caves. The Weeping Caves. Qhorin knew them, a series of limestone caverns that wept moisture year-round, creating frozen waterfalls in winter that gave the place its name. Good defensible position. Fresh water. Shelter from the wind. A clan fleeing south might hole up there for a season, waiting for passes to clear, or waiting for something else to pass them by. We follow, Qhorin said. Hagen looked up sharply. Halfhand, if there's a whole clan, then we don't fight them. Qhorin met each man's eyes in turn. 6 rangers, himself included. Good men, hard men, but not enough to face a wildling clan in their own territory. We talk. The silence that followed was profound. Talk. Blaine said the word as if tasting something foul. With wildlings. "They're the enemy," Hagen added. The vows say we're the shield that guards the realms of men," Qhorin interrupted. His voice carried no heat, only certainty. "Doesn't say shields can't have sense. Doesn't say we kill when talking serves better." Stone Snake frowned. "Lord Commander know you're planning this?" "Lord Commander sent me to find information." Qhorin started west, following the tracks. "Can't get information from dead men. Not the kind we need." Behind him, he heard the rangers exchange glances. Then, one by one, they followed. They always did. Qhorin had learned that about command. Men would follow you into madness if you walked ahead of them with conviction. Whether that made him a good leader or simply a convincing liar, he had stopped trying to decide. They found the Hornfoot clan on the second day of tracking. The caves sat in a narrow valley, their entrances weeping icicles that caught the pale sunlight and threw it back in fractured colours. Smoke rose from 3 of the openings, cook fires, carefully managed to avoid drawing attention. But Qhorin's rangers had drawn attention anyway. He had meant them to. The wildlings spotted them when they were still 200 yards out, too far for a clean bowshot, but close enough to signal intent. Qhorin had his men spread out in a loose line, weapons sheathed, hands visible. The rangers' black cloaks stood stark against the snow. "Halfhand," Stone Snake murmured. "I count at least 20 fighting men at the cave mouths, probably more inside." "I know. They could fill us with arrows before we get halfway there." "They could," Qhorin agreed. He kept walking. When they were 100 yards out, a figure emerged from the central cave. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing furs that had seen better seasons. The wildling carried a great curved blade, not quite a proper sword, but deadly enough. Behind him, other figures appeared. Qhorin counted them automatically. 23 men, 9 women that he could see. The women carried weapons too. Wildling clans did not have the luxury of keeping their women soft and useless. Qhorin stopped at 50 yards, close enough to speak without shouting, close enough to die if this went poorly. He raised his right hand, the maimed one, palm forward in the ancient sign of parley. The wildling chieftain stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he raised his own hand in response. "Crowfoot wants to talk," the chieftain called. His voice was rough as stone grinding. "Or Crowfoot just wants to die slower." "Talk," Qhorin said, "if you're willing." "Why would I be willing?" "Because you're afraid of something," Qhorin said flatly. "And it's not us." The words hung in the cold air. The wildlings shifted, hands tightening on weapons. But the chieftain did not move. His eyes, pale blue in a wind-burned face, studied Qhorin with an intensity that spoke of intelligence, not mere brutality. "Come forward," the chieftain said finally. "You only. Your crows stay there." "Halfhand," Stone Snake began. Qhorin silenced him with a look. He unbelted his sword, handed it to Stone Snake, and walked forward alone. His boots crunched in the snow. The sound seemed impossibly loud. When he was 10 yards from the chieftain, he stopped. "I'm called Halfhand," he said. "I know who you are, Crow." The chieftain's mouth twisted. "Killed my cousin's son 2 winters past. Boy had 9 fingers before he met you. Had none after." Qhorin said nothing. He had killed many wildlings in his years ranging. He remembered some of their faces. Most had blurred together into a single enemy. Desperate, dangerous, human. "That boy tried to kill me first," Qhorin said. "I was faster." You were." The chieftain spat into the snow. "I'm called Tormund. Speak your words, Crow, before I change my mind about listening." Tormund. Qhorin filed the name away. A chieftain important enough to lead a clan this size, wise enough not to attack 6 rangers on sight. That spoke to experience, perhaps to desperation. "Your people are moving south," Qhorin said, "away from your winter grounds, abandoning camps you've held for generations." "Why?" Tormund's expression hardened. "Why should I tell you crow business?" "Because I want to know what you're running from," Qhorin said. "And because if it's bad enough to drive you south, it's something the Watch needs to know about." For a long moment, the only sound was wind moving through ice. Then Tormund barked a laugh, sharp, bitter, without humour. "You asking me to help the crows?" "I'm asking you to help yourself," Qhorin said. "The wall stands between you and the 7 kingdoms. We're the shield. But shields break if they don't know what they're facing." Tormund studied him. Then, surprisingly, the wildling gestured toward the caves. "Walk with me, Halfhand. Let's talk like men instead of animals snarling over territory." Inside the cave, the air smelled of smoke and unwashed bodies, and fear. Qhorin's eyes adjusted slowly to the dimness. He counted more people than he had seen outside. Women, children, elders. A clan preparing for a long winter, or a long flight. Tormund led him past cookfires and sleeping furs to a smaller chamber, where the ceiling wept water that had frozen into fantastic shapes. The wildling chieftain settled onto a stone ledge, gestured for Qhorin to do the same. "Your cousin's son," Tormund said abruptly. "The one you killed. He was stupid. Brave, but stupid. Tried to raid a Night's Watch supply caravan alone. I told him he'd die." The chieftain's scarred hands flexed. Being right doesn't make it easier. Qhorin understood that. He thought of Dalbridge, of Beren, of all the men he had led into the cold and left there. "No," he agreed quietly. "It doesn't." Tormund looked at him with something that might have been respect. "You're not like other crows." "I'm exactly like other crows," Qhorin said. "I just don't pretend the vows make us better than we are. We're men doing a hard job, same as you. We're not the same, Crow. We're free. You're slaves to a wall of ice." "Free to run?" Qhorin asked. "Free to abandon your winter grounds and flee south? That's not freedom, that's terror." The words struck home. Tormund's face darkened. For a moment, Qhorin thought he had pushed too far. Then the wildling sighed, and some of the hardness left his eyes. 3 moons passed, Tormund said slowly. "My hunters found a camp of the Rattleshirt's people. 40 men, women, children, all dead. Not killed by weapons, Crow, not killed by beasts." He leaned forward. "Killed by cold, frozen where they stood, in the middle of summer." Qhorin felt ice crawl up his spine. "What kind of cold does that?" "The kind that walks," Tormund said. "The kind that hunts. My grandfather spoke of it. Old tales from the long night, when winter lasted a generation, and things came down from the lands of always winter." He met Qhorin's eyes. "The others, Crow. The White Walkers, the Cold Gods, whatever name you want to give them." The cavern seemed colder suddenly. Qhorin thought of the unnatural silence he had felt beyond the milkwater, the abandoned camps, the terror in fleeing wildling eyes. "I thought they were just stories," Qhorin said. "Legends to frighten children." "So did I." Tormund's voice was grim. "So did everyone. But legends don't leave forests empty. Legends don't make grown warriors piss themselves with fear." He stood, paced to the cave mouth, stared out at the white landscape. "We're moving south because north is death. And if the wall doesn't hold, if you crows break, we all die, your people and mine." Qhorin absorbed this. Part of him wanted to dismiss it as wildling superstition, but he had seen enough in his rangings to know that old tales sometimes carried truth, and Tormund did not strike him as a man who frightened easily. "If what you say is true," Qhorin said carefully, "then we can't be enemies. Not now. Not with something worse coming." Tormund laughed bitterly. "You want a truce? Between the Watch and the Free Folk?" "I want to survive," Qhorin said. "Same as you. And right now, that means not killing each other when there's something worse, waiting to kill us both." The wildling chieftain turned, studied Qhorin with those pale eyes. "What are you offering, Crow?" "Information," Qhorin said. "We tell you what we learn about the threat. You tell us what you learn. And for this season, just this season, your people don't raid the villages near the wall. We don't hunt you." "Just this season?" Tormund's mouth quirked. "What happens when spring comes?" "Spring isn't promised to anyone," Qhorin said flatly. "Let's survive winter first." Silence filled the chamber. Outside, Qhorin could hear his rangers shifting nervously, probably wondering if he had been killed. He could hear children crying softly in the deeper caves, and the murmur of women trying to comfort them. Finally, Tormund extended his hand. "This season, Crow, we share what we know. We keep our people from each other's throats. But come spring..." "Come spring, we're enemies again," Qhorin agreed. He clasped the wildling's forearm in the way of the north. "Good enough." Tormund's grip was iron. "You know, your Night's Watch will call you Oathbreaker for this." "Maybe," Qhorin said. "But the vows say I'm the shield that guards the realms of men. Doesn't specify which men." He released Tormund's arm. "And right now, keeping you alive serves the realm better than killing you. Practical for a crow." Tormund almost smiled. "I can respect that. Doesn't mean I like you." "I don't like me either," Qhorin said. "Most days." That surprised a genuine laugh from the wildling chieftain. He walked Qhorin back through the caves, past the frightened faces of his people. At the entrance, he stopped. "The thing that took your fingers," Tormund said. "What was it?" Qhorin held up his maimed hand. "One of yours. Woman with an axe. Fought like winter itself." "She dead?" "Yes." Tormund nodded slowly. "Good. Was probably my other cousin. She was always mean." He stepped back. "Go, Halfhand. Take your crows and ride south. Tell your Lord Commander what I told you. Tell him winter is coming, and it's bringing things that don't care about vows or honor or which side of the wall a man was born on." Qhorin walked back to his rangers. They watched him approach with questions in their eyes. When he reached them, Stone Snake handed him his sword. "Well?" the ranger asked quietly. "We ride for the Shadow Tower," Qhorin said. He buckled the weapon back into place. "And we send a raven to Castle Black. The Lord Commander needs to know what's moving in the dark." "Did you learn anything worth the risk?" Blaine asked. Qhorin looked back at the caves, where wildling faces watched from the shadows. Enemies who were not enemies. Free folk who were trapped by something worse than the wall. "Yes," he said, "I learned that the war we've been fighting might not be the real one." He did not elaborate. The rangers did not press. They mounted and rode, 6 black-cloaked men in a wilderness of white. Behind them, the weeping caves disappeared into the landscape. Ahead, the Shadow Tower waited with warm fires and questions. Qhorin was not certain he could answer. In the cold hours of riding that followed, Qhorin thought about what Tormund had said, about the others, about winter that walked and cold that hunted. Part of him still wanted to dismiss it as legend, but he thought of the silence in the forests, the terror in wildling eyes, the way entire clans abandoned territories they had held for generations. Something was coming, something old, and the Night's Watch, undermanned, undersupplied, fighting an enemy they did not believe in, would have to stand against it. The mathematics of that survival were worse than anything Qhorin had calculated before. They rode through the long winter twilight and did not speak of what they had learned. Some truths were too cold for words. The avalanche came without warning. One moment, Qhorin was leading his party through a narrow defile in the Frostfangs, watching the grey sky for signs of further snow. The next, the world became thunder and white death. "Run!" someone screamed. Qhorin thought it might have been young Ed. But running was useless. The mountain was falling, and mountains did not negotiate. Qhorin threw himself against the cliff face, pressing into an overhang barely deep enough to shelter a man. Snow and ice roared past, a river of winter fury that swallowed sound and sense. He felt the concussion in his chest, felt chunks of ice hammer the stone above him. Then, as suddenly as it began, silence returned. Qhorin pushed away from the cliff, coughing in the powder-thick air. "Report!" he called. His voice sounded muffled, distant. "Sound off!" "Here!" Stonesnake off to the left, digging himself free from a drift. "Alive!" Blaine, further back. One by one, the voices came. Qhorin counted them with the same mechanical precision he counted everything. Stonesnake, Blaine, Squire Dalbridge, the younger cousin of the man who had died on the last ranging, Hagen, Left-Hand Lou, Blackjack Bulwer, Ed the Younger, Garth Greenwall, Red Allen, Bearded Ben, and Mully. 12 voices, all 12 men accounted for. Then Qhorin saw what the avalanche had taken. The horses were gone. All 8 of them, swept away down the mountainside or buried under tons of snow and ice. With them went the pack animals and the supplies. Food, tents, extra furs, rope, medicine, everything they needed to survive 2 weeks in the mountains. "Mother's mercy," Bearded Ben breathed, staring at where the narrow trail had been. Now there was only a field of broken ice and snow, impossible to cross safely. Qhorin said nothing. He was already doing the mathematics. They made camp in a cave 3 hours later, once Qhorin was certain no second avalanche would follow. The rangers gathered around a small fire, built from deadwood Hagen had found clinging to life in a sheltered spot. 12 men, huddled close, none of them speaking. Qhorin had sent Stonesnake and Blackjack to scout for any supplies that might have survived. They returned empty-handed, except for one torn saddlebag containing salt pork wrapped in oilcloth. When opened, they found enough for perhaps 4 meals, for 12 men. "How far to the Shadow Tower?" Red Allen asked. He was young, barely 20, with the copper hair that gave him his name. His hands shook as he warmed them at the fire. 14 days, Qhorin said. 16, if the weather turns. The rangers exchanged looks. They all understood what that meant. "We could hunt," Squire Dalbridge suggested. His voice carried hope that his eyes did not. "There's game in these mountains." "No game," Stonesnake interrupted quietly. "Haven't seen tracks for 3 days now. Whatever's driving the wildlings south, it's cleared out the animals too." Qhorin had noticed that as well. The unnatural silence that haunted these mountains had deepened since his last ranging. Whatever was coming from the north, it was coming faster. "We could try the wildling camps," Left-Hand Lou offered. "The ones we saw abandoned 2 days back. Might have left supplies." Looted, Qhorin said flatly. We checked. Remember? Lou fell silent. They had checked. Every abandoned camp they had passed showed signs of hasty departure. Cookfires left burning, furs abandoned, but no food. The wildlings took what they could carry and ran. Whatever they left behind would not sustain 12 men. Qhorin looked around the fire at each face. Good men, hard men, but not hard enough for what he was about to say. We have provisions for 4 days, he said. His voice carried no emotion, only fact. We need 16 to reach safety. Those are the numbers. We could ration, Molly said. Stretch it. We could stretch 4 days to 8, Qhorin interrupted. Maybe 10 if we starve slow. Then we die anyway, only weaker. He let that settle. Lord Commander Mormont needs to know what we saw beyond the Milkwater, needs to know about the wildling movements, about what Tormund told us. That information might save the Watch, might save the realm. The fire crackled. No one spoke. 6 men can make 16 days on the supplies we have, Qhorin continued. Move fast, stay light. 6 men can reach the Shadow Tower and deliver the report. Understanding dawned slowly on their faces. Horror followed close behind. No, Red Allen said. The word came out strangled. No, you can't mean... 6 stay behind, Qhorin said. 6 go forward. That's murder, Squire Dalbridge breathed. That's mathematics, Qhorin corrected. His grey eyes swept the circle. 12 men die or 6 men live. Those are the only choices the mountain left us. There has to be another way, Bearded Ben said. The older ranger's voice cracked. We're brothers. We don't abandon brothers. We're not abandoning anyone, Stonesnake said quietly. He had been silent until now, but Qhorin saw understanding in the younger man's eyes. We're making sure the Watch survives. That's the vow. Not personal survival. The Watch's survival. Fuck the vow. Red Allen stood abruptly. I didn't take the black to die freezing in a cave while my brothers walk away. Then you shouldn't have taken the black at all, Qhorin said. His voice was cold as the wind outside. The vow is everything. Your life is nothing. My life is nothing. The Watch is all that matters. Easy to say when you're not the one staying behind, Allen spat. Qhorin stood. He was not a large man, but something in his presence made the younger ranger step back. I'm staying, Qhorin said simply. The cave fell silent. Halfhand, Stonesnake began. I'm staying, Qhorin repeated. The Lord Commander needs my report, yes, but Stonesnake can deliver it. He knows everything I know. He's a better tracker, faster on his feet. Qhorin looked at each man in turn. I'm staying because I gave the order. I choose who lives and who dies. That means I stay with the ones who die. That's madness, Blackjack said. You're the best ranger we have. The Watch needs you. The Watch needs the information more than it needs me. Qhorin sat back down, his tone brooking no argument. And it needs men who will make hard choices when hard choices are required. Stonesnake will lead the 6 who go forward. I'll stay with the 5 who remain. I'll stay. Bearded Ben's voice was hoarse but firm. I'm old, 60 winters, slower than I was. Take younger men south. I'll stay too. Garth Greenwell stood. He was 45, scarred from a dozen rangings. Got no family waiting, no reason to take a spot from men who might still father sons. One by one they volunteered. Left Hand Lou, because his leg had never healed, right from a wildling spear. Blackjack Bulwer, because he said he was tired of being cold. Mully, because someone had to, and it might as well be him. In the end, they had 7 volunteers for 6 spots. Qhorin looked at them, these men who would choose death so their brothers might live, and felt something twist in his chest. Not grief. He had burned that out of himself years ago. Something else. Something that might have been pride. "Draw lots," he said quietly. 5 stay, 6 go. We leave at dawn. They drew lots with burned sticks from the fire. Short meant stay. Long meant go. Red Allen drew long, and wept with relief he tried to hide. Squire Dalbridge drew long, and looked sick with guilt. Hagan drew short and smiled grimly, like he had expected nothing else. The old gods had never favoured him, he said. When it was done, the 6 who would leave gathered their meagre supplies. The 5 who would stay divided what remained, a blanket each, a few scraps of tinder, the knowledge that the cold would take them in a matter of days. Stone Snake approached Qhorin as the others settled in for their last night together. "Halfhand," the ranger said quietly, "this is wrong. The watch needs you. I can't." "You can," Qhorin interrupted. "You'll lead them south. You'll deliver the report to Lord Commander Mormont. You'll tell him everything we learned, the wildlings fleeing, the silence in the forests, what Tormund said about the others." He gripped Stone Snake's shoulder. "You'll do what needs doing, same as always. And you'll die here for nothing." "Not for nothing," Qhorin said. "For the watch, there's a difference." Stone Snake's jaw tightened. "I won't forget this." "Yes, you will," Qhorin said. "Not cruelly, just truthfully. You'll have other rangings, other decisions, other men to lead and lose. In a year, maybe 2, this will just be one more dead ranger in your memory. That's how it should be. That's how command works." He turned away before Stone Snake could respond. There was nothing more to say. The decision was made. The lots were drawn. All that remained was waiting for the cold. They spent the night awake, all 12 of them. Some men told stories, tales of ranging, of loves left behind, of reasons they had taken the black. Others sat in silence, each alone with their thoughts, despite the press of bodies around the fire. Qhorin found himself thinking of the first man he had left behind. Not chosen to leave, not volunteering, just a boy who had fallen through ice on the Milkwater and could not be reached. Qhorin had been young then, not yet Halfhand, still believing that determination and courage could overcome cold mathematics. He had tried to save that boy, had risked 3 other lives in the attempt. The ice had been too thin, the current too strong. In the end, he had retreated, leaving the boy to drown in freezing water, and learned the first law of ranging. Sometimes you cannot save everyone. Sometimes you cannot save anyone. All you can do is choose who lives and count the cost later. He had been counting ever since. Halfhand, bearded Ben settled beside him. The older ranger's face was weathered as old leather, his beard more white than black. "Thank you." Qhorin frowned. For what? For staying. Would be easier to go, to let us die alone. Ben stared into the fire. Men remember that. The ones who go forward, they'll remember you stayed behind. Will mean something to them. Make them better rangers, knowing what you gave up. "I'm not giving up anything," Qhorin said. "I'm doing what the vow requires." "Aye," Ben agreed. "But most men don't follow through. Most men find ways to survive, justify leaving others behind. You don't." He looked at Qhorin with eyes that had seen 6 decades of winter. "That's worth something, even if we're the only ones who know it." Qhorin had no answer to that. He sat beside bearded Ben and watched the fire burn low. Around them, his rangers slept in fits and starts. Tomorrow, 6 would leave, 5 would stay, and the mathematics of survival would claim another payment from his account. He thought of Tormund's words. Winter is coming, and it's bringing things that don't care about vows or honour. The wildling chieftain was right, but vows and honour were all the Night's Watch had. Strip those away, and they were just armed men freezing on a wall, waiting to die. The vows gave it meaning. The honour made it bearable, even when honour meant dying in a cave so others could live. Dawn came grey and cold. The 6 who would leave prepared in silence, checking gear, redistributing supplies. The 5 who would stay helped them, offering advice, adjusting straps, saying nothing of consequence, because everything had already been said. Qhorin walked Stone Snake to the cave mouth. Beyond, the mountains stretched endlessly white, beneath a colourless sky. "Tell Mormont," Qhorin said. "Tell him it's real. The others, the ancient enemy, all of it. Tell him we need more men, better supplies, and time we probably don't have." "I'll tell him," Stone Snake promised. "And tell him—" Qhorin paused, searching for words that had always come harder than silence. "Tell him the wildlings aren't the real enemy anymore. Tell him we need to think differently about who stands on which side of the wall." Stone Snake nodded. He understood. He had been at the Weeping Caves. He had seen Tormund's fear. The 6 rangers filed out into the dawn. Qhorin watched them go, 6 black cloaks against white snow, growing smaller with distance. Stone Snake looked back once. Qhorin raised his maimed right hand in farewell. Then they were gone, and he was alone with 4 men waiting to die. "Well," Hagen said from behind him, "now what?" Qhorin turned back to the cave. 4 faces watched him. Bearded Ben, Garth Greenwall, Left Hand Lou, Blackjack Buller. Good men. Hard men. Men who had chosen to stay because the watch needed them to. "Now we wait," Qhorin said, "and we keep the fire burning as long as we can." "And after?" Lou asked. Qhorin thought of all the men he had lost, all the choices that had led him here. The avalanche was not his fault, but the decision to range this deep was. The route through the mountains was. Every choice that brought 12 men to this place where only 6 could leave. "After," he said quietly. "The cold takes us, same as it takes everyone eventually." They settled back around the fire. 4 days of food remained. Perhaps they could stretch it to 6 if they were disciplined. But the real killer would not be starvation. It would be the cold. Once the wood ran out, once the fire died, the mountain would claim them. Qhorin sat with his back against stone and closed his eyes. He thought of the Shadow Tower, of Castle Black, of the great wall stretching across the world. Somewhere out there, Stone Snake and 5 rangers pushed south, carrying information that might save the watch. 5 men would die here, but 6 would live. The information would reach Mormont. The watch would endure. The mathematics balanced, even if they felt like murder. Even if he would carry these 4 faces to whatever hell waited for men who chose, who lived, and who died. Outside, the wind began to rise. Inside, the fire crackled and burned. They had 4 days before the cold came for them. Qhorin Halfhand began counting them down. The cold was wrong. Qhorin had spent 20 years ranging beyond the wall. He knew cold the way sailors knew the sea. Its moods, its dangers, the difference between a freeze that killed quickly and one that killed slow. But this cold was different. This cold had intention. He stood at the edge of the wildling camp, abandoned 3 days past, by his estimate, and felt it in his bones. The wrongness. Halfhand. Stone Snake appeared at his shoulder, moving silent as his name. 2 years had passed since the supply decision, since Qhorin had expected to die in a cave and woken instead to find rescue. A late supply caravan from Eastwatch, riding north to resupply the Shadow Tower, had found them half frozen but alive. 4 men saved by chance and a merchant captain who had ignored orders to wait for spring. The old bear had called it providence. Qhorin called it borrowed time. "What do you see?" Stone Snake asked. Qhorin gestured to the camp. 30 shelters, maybe more. Elk-hide tents and crude lean-tos, abandoned so hastily that belongings lay scattered in the snow. Cookpots still hung over dead fires, furs that would mean the difference between survival and death, left behind like trash. "Fear," Qhorin said simply. He walked into the camp, his rangers spreading out behind him. 8 this time, enough to fight if they had to, few enough to move quietly. Besides Stone Snake, there was Squire Dalbridge, who was no longer quite so young. Eben, who fought with an axe in each hand. Blaine, who had survived a dozen rangings and looked old because of it, and 4 others Qhorin trusted to keep their mouths shut and their eyes open. The snow here was trampled and refrozen, showing the chaos of departure. Qhorin read the story in the tracks. People running, not walking, heading south, always south. "They left livestock," Eben said, crouching beside a frozen goat carcass. "Slaughtered, but not butchered. Just killed and left." Qhorin examined it. The goat had been killed with a blade, its throat opened efficiently. But wildlings did not waste meat. Even fleeing, they would take what they could carry, unless they were fleeing something that made meat meaningless. "How long?" he asked. Eben studied the blood, the state of the body. 4 days, maybe 5. They were getting closer. Qhorin moved deeper into the camp. He found a child's doll made from scraps of fur, lying face down in the snow. Nearby, a woman's comb carved from bone. Small things, precious things, abandoned in panic. "Halfhand, look at this." Squire Dalbridge stood beside a weirwood tree at the camp's edge. The ancient heart tree bore a face carved long ago by the children of the forest, or so the tales said. But someone had carved something else beside it. Fresh cuts, still weeping sap that had frozen into amber tears. Qhorin studied the markings, crude symbols slashed deep into the pale bark. He recognized some from his rangings, warnings, prayers to the old gods, but others were unfamiliar, desperate. One symbol appeared again and again, a circle with jagged lines radiating outward, like cold spreading, like death walking. "What's it mean?" Dalbridge asked. "It means they're more afraid of what's behind them than what's ahead," Qhorin said. He traced the symbol with his finger. The sap was frozen solid. "It means we need to find out what's driving them south." "We could catch up to them," Eben suggested. "Question survivors." Qhorin shook his head. "They won't stop to talk. Not running like this." He turned to face north, where the land rose toward the Frostfangs, and beyond that, the lands of always winter. "We go to the source, find what they're running from." Stone Snake's expression darkened. "Halfhand, we're already 10 days beyond the Milkwater. Any further, and we might actually learn something useful," Qhorin interrupted. "Lord Commander didn't send us to count abandoned camps. He sent us to find out why the wildlings are fleeing, why clans that have held these lands for 1,000 years are suddenly moving south like the world's ending." "Maybe it is," Blaine muttered. Qhorin almost smiled. Almost. Then we'd better know for certain before we tell the old bear. They rode north. 3 days deeper into wildling territory, they found the war party, or what remained of it. "Gods preserve us," Squire Dalbridge whispered. Even Eben, who had seen men die in every way winter could devise, looked shaken. Qhorin dismounted slowly, studying the scene with the detachment he had learned to wear like armor. 12 wildlings, all men, all armed. They stood frozen in combat positions, axes raised, spears thrust forward, mouths open in silent screams. Ice covered them completely, transforming them into statues of death. But there were no enemies, no bodies of whatever they had fought. Just 12 men frozen mid-battle against something that left no corpse. "This was summer," Stone Snake said quietly. He knelt beside one of the frozen corpses, examining the ground. "See the grass? Still green under the ice. This happened when the weather was warm." "Nothing freezes like this in summer," Eben said. "Nothing natural." "No," Qhorin agreed. He walked among the frozen warriors, studying their faces. Terror was written there, preserved forever in ice. Nothing natural at all. He found tracks then, barely visible, but present. They led away from the frozen wildlings, heading north. Not the tracks of men or animals. These were strange, too perfect, too cold. Where they pressed into the earth, the grass had died, and the soil had frozen solid. Qhorin followed them for 20 yards before they simply stopped, as if whatever made them had ceased to exist, or had risen into the air, or had never existed as flesh and bone at all. He returned to his rangers. They watched him with questions in their eyes and fear they were trying hard to hide. "We're turning back," Qhorin said. Relief flooded their faces, then confusion. "But you said," Dalbridge began. "I said we needed to find the source," Qhorin interrupted. "We found it." He gestured to the frozen warriors. "Or at least, we found enough to know we're not equipped to face it. This is beyond us, beyond swords and bows and 8 good men." "What is it?" Stone Snake asked. "What did this?" Qhorin thought of the stories, the ones old men told in the Shadow Tower when the fire burned low and winter winds howled. Tales from the age of heroes, from the long night, from times when the world was young and dark things walked in it. "The old enemy," he said quietly. "The others, the White Walkers, whatever name you want to give them." He looked at each man in turn. "They're real, and they're coming south." "The others are just stories," Blaine protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Stories that freeze men solid in summer." Qhorin shook his head. "Stories that drive entire wildling clans from their winter grounds. Stories that make the forest fall silent and the game disappear." He pointed at the frozen corpses. "Look at them. Whatever did this, it wasn't wildlings, it wasn't weather, it was something else, something old." The rangers were silent. The truth sat heavy among them, cold as the wind. "We ride for the Shadow Tower," Qhorin said. "Fast as we can. Lord Commander needs to know." They did not argue. They mounted quickly, checking weapons and supplies with the efficiency of men who knew they might need to fight, or flee, at any moment. Within minutes they were riding south, 8 black cloaks against white snow. Behind them, 12 frozen warriors stood eternal guard against an enemy that had already passed. They rode hard for 2 days, stopping only when the horses absolutely required rest. Qhorin pushed them ruthlessly, driven by an urgency he could not fully explain. It was instinct, perhaps, or fear. or the memory of that unnatural cold seeping into his bones. On the third day, they encountered survivors. A wildling woman, young, carrying a child, barely old enough to walk. She stumbled through the snow, half frozen, her lips blue and her eyes wild with terror. When she saw the black cloaks, she did not run. She fell to her knees. "Please," she said in the old tongue. Qhorin understood it. Most rangers did, after enough time beyond the wall. "Please, the cold, the white shadows, they're coming." Qhorin dismounted. Behind him, his rangers tensed, hands moving to weapons. But Qhorin held up his hand, the maimed one, in a gesture of peace. "We won't hurt you," he said in the same language. "Where are you going?" "South," she gasped. "Away from the cold that walks, away from the dead things." She clutched her child closer. The boy stared at Qhorin with eyes too large for his thin face. "They took my husband, took my clan. I ran. I kept running." "What took them?" Qhorin asked, though he suspected he knew. "The white shadows," she said. "They came at night, silent, cold. The men tried to fight, but their swords—" She shuddered. "Their swords shattered like ice. And the dead, they rose again. Our own dead, with blue eyes, killing us." Qhorin felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not surprise, confirmation. The stories spoke of this too, the others raising the dead, turning them into weapons. "How long ago?" he asked. 2 days, maybe 3. The woman's voice broke. "I've been walking. Can't stop. If I stop, they'll find me." Qhorin looked at Stone Snake. The younger ranger's face was grim, but he nodded slightly. They both understood what Qhorin was about to do. "Go south," Qhorin told the woman. He pulled dried meat from his saddlebag, handed it to her. "Follow the rivers. They'll lead you to the wall. When you get there, tell them Qhorin Halfhand sent you. Tell them to give you shelter." The woman stared at the food like it was treasure beyond price. Your night's watch. You'll kill me." "I'm letting you go," Qhorin said simply. "The vows say I guard the realms of men. You're a woman with a child, running from something that wants you dead. That makes you someone I'm sworn to protect." "Even though I'm wildling?" "Even though," Qhorin agreed. She took the food with trembling hands. Then, surprising him, she touched his maimed hand. "The gods remember mercy," she said, "even when men forget." Then she was gone, stumbling south with her child, 2 more refugees fleeing the cold that walked. Eben rode up beside Qhorin. "That was unwise, Halfhand. She could warn her people. Tell them we're ranging this far north." "Let her warn them," Qhorin said. He mounted again, his expression hard. "Right now, I don't care about wildling raiders or stolen goats. There's something worse coming. Something that makes our old feuds look like children fighting over toys." "You really believe her?" Blaine asked. "The dead rising, white shadows?" "I believe the fear in her eyes," Qhorin said. "And I believe those frozen warriors we found. And I believe the silence in these forests." He looked at his rangers. "More importantly, I believe we need to get back to the wall and start preparing for something the Watch hasn't faced in 8,000 years." They rode on. The landscape around them was beautiful in its desolation. Snow-covered peaks, frozen rivers, forests of pine and sentinel trees. But Qhorin felt no beauty in it now. Only threat. Only the promise of winter that would not end. The cold had always been their enemy. But now the cold itself was the enemy. And it was coming. On the 5th day, they reached familiar ground, territory the Night's Watch patrolled regularly. The land felt different here. Warmer, more alive. Birds called from the trees. Small game left tracks in the snow. The oppressive silence had lifted, but Qhorin knew it was temporary, a reprieve, not a pardon. What he had seen beyond the milkwater was coming south. It would not stop at some invisible line. It would not respect the wall or the watch or 7,000 years of tradition. It would come because that was its nature, because winter always came. They rode into the shadow tower as the sun set. The men on the walls called out in relief. The ranging party had been gone 3 weeks, longer than planned. Rangers emerged from the halls to greet them, asking questions, demanding stories. Qhorin dismounted without ceremony. He handed his horse to a stable boy and walked directly to the rookery, taking the stairs 2 at a time despite the exhaustion that made his legs feel like stone. Maester Mullin looked up from his work as Qhorin entered. The old man took one look at his face and set down his quill. "Send a raven to Castle Black," Qhorin said. "Mark it urgent. Address it to Lord Commander Mormont personally." "What should I write?" Mullin asked. Qhorin stared out the narrow window at the darkening sky. Beyond the wall, in the far north, something ancient stirred. Something that had slept for generations was waking. And the Night's Watch, 7,000 men spread thin across 300 miles of ice, would have to face it. "Tell him," Qhorin said slowly, "that the old stories are true. The others are real. They're killing wildlings, raising the dead, moving south." He turned to face the Maester. "Tell him we need every man we can get, every weapon, every scrap of dragonglass or Valyrian steel that still exists in the 7 kingdoms." Mullin's hand shook as he reached for parchment. "Qhorin, you're certain? This isn't wildling superstition, or—" "I saw them," Qhorin interrupted. "Or I saw what they left behind. Men frozen solid in summer. A woman fleeing with terror in her eyes. An entire forest emptied of life." His voice was flat, emotionless, but his grey eyes burned. "It's coming, Maester. The long night, the winter that doesn't end, and we're not ready." He left before Mullin could respond. The stairs seemed longer descending. By the time he reached the common hall, his rangers had already spread the word. Men gathered around, asking questions, voices rising in disbelief or fear. Qhorin walked past them all. He needed sleep. He needed food. He needed to stop seeing those frozen warriors in his mind's eye. But first, he needed to sit alone in the armory and count the cost. Count the borrowed time. Count the days until winter arrived, with teeth and dead eyes and cold that walked like a man. The mathematics of this survival would require more than choosing who lived and who died. It would require the impossible, convincing the realm that the monsters from children's stories were real, and that they were coming. The wall wept. Qhorin stood at the base of the great ice barrier and watched water run down its face in the summer sun. 700 feet of ancient ice, stretching east and west as far as the eye could see. The greatest fortification ever built by the hands of men. Or so the stories claimed. Some said the children of the forest had helped raise it. Others whispered of giants and magic and powers long forgotten. Qhorin knew only that it stood between the realm and whatever was coming from the north, and that it might not be enough. Impressive, isn't it? Qhorin turned. Lord Commander Jor Mormont stood beside him, his grey beard catching the light. The old bear had aged in the 2 years since Qhorin had sent his warning about the others. The burden of command sat heavier on his shoulders now, pressing him down like winter pressing on the world. "It's ice," Qhorin said simply. Mormont's mouth quirked. Most men find it more inspiring than that. Most men haven't ranged as far north as I have. Qhorin looked up at the wall's summit, where black-cloaked brothers moved like ants. Ice melts, my lord. Everything melts eventually. Cheerful as ever, Qhorin. Mormont sighed. Walk with me. They moved along the wall's base, past the great gates of Castle Black. 300 brothers gathered in the yard beyond, the largest force the Night's Watch had assembled in living memory. Perhaps the largest since the days of the Targaryen kings, when the Watch numbered in the thousands instead of hundreds. 300 men, Mormont said quietly. Every ranger we could spare from the other castles. Every steward who can hold a blade. Even some builders who swore they'd never seen the other side of the wall. He shook his head. And it still feels like sending children to fight a war. It is, Qhorin agreed. But they're the children we have. They stopped at a weapons rack where brothers were checking gear. Qhorin recognized faces. Jarman Buckwell, leading the scouts from the Shadow Tower. Qhorin Smallwood, who commanded a column of rangers from Castle Black. Older men, experienced men, but still men who had never faced what waited in the north. I need you to command the vanguard, Mormont said. Take your best rangers, scout ahead of the main force. Find Mance Raider's army before they find us. And when I find them, Qhorin asked, assess the threat. Report back. Mormont's expression hardened. And if you encounter these others, you mentioned in your reports, you run. You understand me, Qhorin? You don't fight. You don't try to be a hero. You observe and retreat. Understood, my lord. I'm serious, Halfhand. Mormont gripped Qhorin's shoulder. You're one of my best rangers. I can't afford to lose you to pride or curiosity. Qhorin met the Lord Commander's eyes. I've never been curious about dying, my lord, and pride doesn't keep you warm beyond the wall. No, Mormont agreed, but duty does strange things to good men, makes them brave when they should be cautious, makes them stand when they should run. He released Qhorin's shoulder. Don't let duty make you stupid. Wouldn't dream of it, my lord. Qhorin assembled his scouts in the armory. Stone Snake, always reliable. Eben with his twin axes. Squire Dalbridge, no longer young, but seasoned by a dozen hard rangings. And 4 others Qhorin trusted to think before they acted. We leave before dawn, Qhorin told them, 2 days ahead of the main force. Our job is to find Mance's army and report its size, position, and intentions. And if we find the others? Eben asked bluntly. We observe from a distance. We do not engage. Qhorin's voice was iron. Whatever's coming from the north, it's bigger than 8 men with swords. Our job is intelligence, not glory. The rangers nodded. They had all heard the stories by now. Qhorin's reports had filtered through the Watch, gaining embellishment with each retelling. Some men dismissed them as wildling superstition. Others believed and were afraid. Qhorin's own men simply accepted the truth. Something was out there, and they would face it when the time came. One more thing, Qhorin said. Lord Commander is assigning us a 9th man, his personal steward. Groans rose from the rangers. Stewards were not warriors. They kept records, managed supplies, poured wine for officers. The idea of bringing one on a ranging was absurd. Halfhand, respectfully, Stone Snake said. We don't have time to nursemaid some soft-handed boy who... The door opened. A young man entered, barely 20, dark-haired, with grey eyes that marked him as a Stark. He wore black from head to toe and moved with the easy grace of someone trained to arms since childhood. Behind him, silent as shadow, padded a massive white direwolf. The rangers fell silent. "This is Jon Snow," Qhorin said, "Lord Commander's steward. He'll be joining us." Jon Snow met Qhorin's eyes without flinching. There was something in that gaze. Not arrogance exactly, but a kind of quiet intensity. A hunger. Qhorin had seen it before in young rangers who came to the wall seeking purpose. Most of them died. A few became legends. "Snow," Qhorin said. "You've ranged before." "Twice, sir," Jon replied. "Both times with Lord Commander Mormont. Small rangings, nothing deep. This won't be a small ranging." Qhorin gestured to the direwolf. "The beast stays here." "Ghost goes where I go," Jon said. Not defiant, just stating fact. "Then you both stay here," Qhorin countered. "I'm not taking a boy and his pet on a deep ranging where we need to move quiet and fast." "Ghost is quieter than any man here," Jon said, "and he can smell wildlings a mile off. He's saved my life twice already." Qhorin studied the direwolf. The beast met his gaze with eyes like red flame. There was intelligence there, and something else. Something that reminded Qhorin of the old stories, of the Stark kings who could wear the skins of beasts, who commanded wolves and ravens and walked in dreams. "Fine," Qhorin said. "But if the wolf slows us down or gives away our position, I'll kill it myself. Understood?" "Understood," Jon said. Eben laughed. "You'd kill a direwolf, Halfhand." "I've killed worse," Qhorin said. He turned back to his rangers. "Check your gear. We ride in 3 hours. Get what rest you can. It'll be the last warm beds you see for a while." The rangers filed out. Jon Snow remained, the white wolf at his side. "Something else?" Qhorin asked. "Why did Lord Commander assign me to you?" Jon asked. "There are other rangers, more experienced ones." Qhorin considered the question. He suspected Mormont had his reasons. Test the boy, perhaps. Or keep him close to someone who might keep him alive. Or maybe the old bear simply wanted his steward to understand what the Watch truly was beyond castle walls and warm halls. "You want to matter," Qhorin said finally. It was not a question. Jon's eyes widened, slightly. "How did you—" "Because you're a bastard with a great name and no place to stand," Qhorin interrupted. "You came to the wall thinking you'd find brotherhood, honor, purpose. Instead, you found your pouring wine and mucking stables while your high-born friends become rangers." He moved closer, his grey eyes boring into Jon's. "So yes, you want to matter, want to prove you're more than your father's shame." Jon's jaw tightened. "Is that wrong?" "No," Qhorin said. "It's what drives every good ranger I've ever known. The ones who don't want to matter are the ones who die first. They've got nothing keeping them sharp." He paused. "But wanting to matter and actually mattering are different things. Out there," he gestured north, "glory is a lie. Honor is a luxury. All that matters is whether you do your duty when it costs you everything." "I will," Jon said. "Everyone says that," Qhorin said. "We'll see if you mean it." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Snow, one more thing. Sir, your wolf, what's its name?" "Ghost." "Fitting." Qhorin looked at the direwolf one more time. "Keep it close. Beyond the wall, the only things you can trust are your brothers and your instincts. Everything else wants you dead." They left Castle Black in the darkness before dawn. 9 riders and 1 white wolf, moving silent through the haunted forest, while 300 rangers slept behind them. Qhorin set a punishing pace. They covered 20 miles the first day, following game trails and ranger paths that most men had forgotten. Jon Snow kept up without complaint, though Qhorin noticed him favouring his left side where his sword belt chafed. The boy was green, but he had endurance. That counted for something. Ghost ranged ahead, appearing and disappearing like his namesake. The direwolf's presence unsettled the horses at first, but they adjusted. Animals learned faster than men, Qhorin had found. They didn't waste time on pride or prejudice. They made camp that night in a hollow beneath a ridgeline. No fire, too visible. They ate salt beef and hard bread and spoke little. Jon sat apart, one hand on Ghost's fur, staring north into the darkness. Qhorin settled beside him. "First deep ranging?" Qhorin asked. "Yes, sir." "What did you expect it would be like?" Jon was silent for a moment. "More heroic, I suppose. Songs make it sound glorious. Rangers riding north to face the wildlings, defending the realm against the darkness. And instead it's cold and quiet, and I'm wondering when something's going to try to kill us." Qhorin almost smiled. That's ranging, hours of nothing interrupted by moments of terror. The songs leave out the nothing part. Makes for boring verses. "You've ranged for 20 years, Jon said. "Why?" "Because someone has to," Qhorin said simply. "That's it. That's the only reason." "What other reason is there?" Qhorin looked at the boy, really looked at him. 16, maybe 17. Still young enough to believe in heroes and destiny. Old enough to have tasted disappointment. "You think I'm here because I love the cold? Because I enjoy watching men freeze to death or choosing who lives and who dies? I'm here because the vows say I'm here. Because the realm needs someone standing on this wall, and I can stand as well as anyone else." "But you're the best ranger in the watch," Jon protested. "Everyone says so. You've survived things that killed other men. You must love it, at least a little." "I love being alive," Qhorin said. "Everything else is just what I do to stay that way." He stood, his joints cracking in the cold. "Get some sleep, Snow. Tomorrow we push deeper, and the day after that we'll likely find wildlings. When we do, you do exactly what I say when I say it. No heroics, no proving yourself. Just follow orders." "Yes, sir." Qhorin walked the perimeter of their camp, checking positions. His rangers had settled into their watches without being told. Stone Snake first, then Ebon, rotating through the night. Good men, reliable men, the kind who would follow orders even when orders meant doing the hard thing. He thought about Jon Snow. The boy had potential, but potential meant nothing beyond the wall. What mattered was whether he could follow through when the moment came, whether he could make the hard choice and live with it after. Qhorin had seen too many young rangers fail that test, seen them freeze in combat or break under the weight of command, or simply give up when the cold became too much. The wall needed men who could endure, who could face impossible odds and keep standing. He suspected Jon Snow might be one of those men, or might not. Time would tell. Ghost materialized from the darkness, red eyes glowing. The direwolf sat beside Qhorin, massive head level with his chest. They regarded each other in silence. "Keep him alive," Qhorin told the wolf. "I've got a feeling Lord Commander wants him back in one piece." The wolf made no sound, but something in those red eyes suggested understanding. Or perhaps Qhorin was simply tired and reading meaning into animal instinct. He took the last watch himself, sat with his back against stone, and watched the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere to the north, Mance Rayder's army moved. Somewhere further north, the others stirred. And somewhere in the darkness, the future of the Night's Watch waited. 300 men marching to face an enemy they didn't truly believe in. 9 scouts ranging ahead to find that enemy. One Lord Commander gambling everything on a single, desperate thrust beyond the wall. The mathematics of survival had never been worse. But the Night's Watch had survived for 8,000 years by doing what needed doing, however impossible it seemed. They would survive this too, or they would die doing their duty. Either way, the wall would stand. It had to, because if it fell, the realm fell with it. And Qhorin Halfhand had already chosen who would live and who would die. He had made his peace with mathematics years ago. All that remained was seeing the equation through to its end. The wildling girl had red hair. That was the first thing Qhorin noticed when they took her. Red as autumn leaves, red as blood on snow. She fought like a cornered wolf when Stone Snake's net caught her, cursing in the old tongue, trying to claw her way free, even as 3 rangers pinned her down. "Easy," Qhorin said. "We won't hurt you if you don't make us." She spat at him. The spittle froze before it hit the ground. They had been tracking the wildling scouts for 2 days, following sign through the Skirling Pass. 5 wildlings, moving fast through terrain that would kill careless men. Qhorin had split his rangers. Ebon and Stone Snake coming from the north, Qhorin and the others from the south, with Jon Snow and Ghost ranging the flanks. The ambush had been perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. They had taken 4 wildlings alive, and killed one who had reached for his horn. Now they had prisoners, and a problem. A larger wildling force was hunting them. "Tie her," Qhorin ordered. "The others too. We need information before we move." Jon Snow approached the red-haired girl with rope. She watched him with grey eyes that reminded Qhorin of winter storms, fierce, cold, unyielding. "You're the crow who killed Mance's scout near the Milkwater," she said in broken common tongue. "Heard about you. Jon Snow, the bastard with the white wolf." Jon's hands hesitated. "How do you know my name?" "Everyone knows Jon Snow now." She smiled without warmth. "The Halfhand's new pet crow. Stark bastard playin' at being a ranger." "That's enough," Qhorin said sharply. He crouched beside her. "What's your name?" "Ygritte." She glared at him. "And I won't tell you nothing, crow." "You'll tell us where Mance Rayder's army is," Qhorin said, "and how many men he's gathered, and whether he's moving toward the wall or away from it." "Go bugger yourself," Ygritte said. Qhorin studied her. Young, 20 at most. But her eyes held the hardness of someone who had survived beyond the wall her entire life. Wildlings raised their children different. Softer people died. Only the hard ones lived to see their 20th winter. "We can do this easy or hard," Qhorin said. "Your choice." "Then hard, I suppose." Ygritte's smile turned feral. "Because I'm not telling you crows nothing." They moved camp to a more defensible position, a narrow canyon with steep walls and only 2 approaches. Qhorin posted guards at both ends and set his other rangers to questioning the prisoners. The 3 male wildlings were older, harder, more resistant. But Qhorin learned enough from their silences to confirm his suspicions. Mance Rayder had united the clans, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They were moving south toward the wall in a great migration, not a raid, but an evacuation, fleeing something worse than the Night's Watch. The mathematics of that should have terrified every man in the 7 kingdoms. But Qhorin knew no one would believe it until it was too late. Halfhand, Stone Snake appeared at his shoulder. "We've got a problem." Qhorin followed him to the canyon's northern approach. Ghost sat there, ears pricked forward, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Beyond, in the dimming light, Qhorin saw movement. "How many?" he asked. 50, maybe more." Stone Snake's expression was grim. "They're spreading out, surrounding the canyon. We're cut off from the south approach too. They've got us trapped." Qhorin felt the familiar cold settle into his bones. Not fear. He had burned that out years ago. Just calculation. 9 men and 4 prisoners against 50 wildlings. The mathematics were clear. "How long until they attack?" Qhorin asked. "Dawn, most likely. They'll wait for light. Wildlings don't like fighting in the dark any more than we do." "That gives us 6 hours. Qhorin turned back toward camp. "Gather the rangers. We need to talk." His 8 men sat in a circle: Stone Snake, Eben, Squire Dalbridge, and the others. Jon Snow sat apart, his hand on Ghost's fur, watching with those intense grey eyes. The white wolf's red gaze tracked Qhorin like a hunter, watching prey. "We're trapped," Qhorin said without preamble. 50 wildlings, maybe more, and they know this terrain better than we do. By dawn, they'll have us completely surrounded." "We could fight our way out," Eben suggested. His hands moved to his twin axes. "Hit them hard at one point. Break through against 50 men?" Qhorin shook his head. "We'd die before we got 20 yards, and even if some of us made it, we'd be leaving prisoners behind to tell Mance everything about the Great Ranging." "Kill the prisoners then," Squire Dalbridge said. His voice was flat, practical. 3 years of hard rangings had burned the softness out of him. "Can't talk if they're dead." "No," Jon Snow said suddenly. All eyes turned to him. "We can't just murder prisoners. That's not what," Qhorin interrupted. "Not honourable. Not the way Ned Stark would do it." He leaned forward. "Your father's been dead 2 years, boy, and honour won't save us from 50 wildlings at dawn." Jon's face flushed. The vows say we're the shield that guards the realms of men," Qhorin cut him off. "They don't say we have to die stupidly. They don't say we give information to the enemy out of some misplaced sense of mercy." Silence fell. The other rangers watched this exchange with the wary attention of men who knew a lesson was being taught. "But you're right," Qhorin said finally. "We don't kill the prisoners. Not yet. Not until we've exhausted every other option." "What other options?" Stone Snake asked. "We're trapped, outnumbered, and cut off from the main force. What can we possibly—" "We negotiate," Qhorin said. The rangers stared at him like he had gone mad. "Negotiate." Eben's voice rose. "With wildlings?" "I've done it before," Qhorin said. "At the Weeping Caves, remember? Sometimes talking serves better than fighting." He looked at each man. "We offer a trade. They're scouts for safe passage south." "They'll never accept," Dalbridge said. "We killed one of theirs taking these prisoners. They want blood." "Maybe," Qhorin agreed. "But maybe not. Wildlings aren't stupid. They know we're just scouts for a larger force. They know attacking us means losses, and they need every man to face the Great Ranging." He stood. "At dawn, I'll go talk to their leader, see if reason works before we try steel." "And if reason doesn't work?" Jon asked quietly. Qhorin met the boy's eyes. "Then we fight. And we die. But at least we'll have tried." Dawn came grey and cold. Qhorin stood at the canyon's northern approach, watching the wildlings form up beyond bow range. 50 men, perhaps 60. Spearmen, archers, raiders with axes and crude swords. In the center, a man in armor made from bones. Rattleshirt, if Qhorin remembered his wildling lore correctly. A hard man, a cruel one, but not stupid. Behind Qhorin, his rangers waited in formation. Jon Snow stood with them now, his hand on his sword, Ghost at his side. The direwolf's presence had unnerved the prisoners. Ygritte had stared at the white beast with something like reverence. "Old gods made flesh," she had whispered. "Haven't seen one of those in my lifetime." Now she stood bound beside the other prisoners, watching as Qhorin walked forward alone. He stopped 20 yards from the wildling line, close enough to talk, far enough to run if this went poorly. "I'm called Halfhand," Qhorin shouted. "I want to speak with your leader." Movement in the wildling ranks. Then Rattleshirt stepped forward, his bone armor clacking with each step. He was tall, lean, with a face like a skull, and eyes that held no mercy. "I know who you are, Crow," Rattleshirt called back. "Know what you did to Alfin Crowkiller too. Took his head clean off, they say." "He tried to kill me first," Qhorin said. "I was faster." You were." Rattleshirt spat. "What do you want, Halfhand? Come to beg for your life?" "Come to offer a trade," Qhorin said. "We have 4 of your scouts. You want them back, we want safe passage south." Rattleshirt laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You're trapped, Crow, surrounded. Why would I trade when I can just kill you and take my people back?" "Because you'll lose men doing it," Qhorin said. "Good men. Men you need to face what's coming from the north." He let that settle. "You know what's out there, Rattleshirt. You've seen the signs same as I have. The silence, the cold that walks, the dead that rise. You need every man you can keep breathing." Something flickered in Rattleshirt's eyes. Not fear, exactly, but recognition. He knew. They all knew. "Even if that's true," Rattleshirt said slowly, "why would I let you crows run south and warn your wall? You'll bring an army. You'll kill my people." "Your people are already coming to the wall," Qhorin countered. "Mance is bringing everyone south, isn't he? Running from what's behind you. When you get to the wall, you'll have to go through us or over us or around us. One way or another, there's going to be a reckoning. Killing 9 rangers here won't change that." Rattleshirt considered this. His wildling warriors watched, waiting for his command. Some looked eager for blood. Others looked tired, haunted. They had seen things. They knew what was coming. "I'll make you a different offer, Crow," Rattleshirt said. "You want to live? Join us. Throw off your black cloak, swear to Mance, and you can walk out of here." Qhorin heard his rangers shift behind him, heard Jon Snow's sharp intake of breath. "You're asking me to break my vows," Qhorin said. "I'm asking you to live," Rattleshirt corrected. "The Night's Watch is dying, Crow. 7,000 years of tradition ending, because there's not enough of you left to hold that wall. Mance knows it. I know it. Every wildling with sense knows it." He gestured north. "When the white cold comes, when the dead rise, your precious vows won't save you. Only the living will survive what's coming. And we're the living Halfhand. Join us." Qhorin felt something shift in the moment. The offer was genuine. He could hear it in Rattleshirt's voice. The wildlings weren't asking him to fight against the Watch. They were asking him to survive. But that was the trap. That was how oaths broke. One small compromise. One moment of choosing life over duty. No, Qhorin said simply. Then you'll die here, Rattleshirt said. You and your crows. We'll take our people back and leave your corpses for the cold. So be it, Qhorin said. He turned and walked back toward his rangers, expecting arrows in his back at any moment. None came. Wildlings respected courage, at least, even in enemies. That went well, Eben said dryly when Qhorin returned. He offered you a chance to live, Stone Snake said. His voice was carefully neutral. You could have accepted, could have bought us time. No, Qhorin interrupted. The moment I break my vows, I'm not a ranger anymore. I'm just a man trying to survive, and men trying to survive make poor decisions. Better than dead men, Jon Snow muttered. Qhorin rounded on him. Is it? Your father died because he chose honor over survival. You think that was foolish? Jon's eyes flashed. My father died because he kept his vows, Qhorin said. Because he put duty before life. Same choice I'm making now. Same choice you'll make eventually, if you live long enough. He moved to the canyon's edge, studying the wildling positions. They were closing in, slowly but surely. By midday, they would attack. And when they did, 9 men would die trying to hold an indefensible position. Unless... An idea formed in Qhorin's mind, cold, cruel, but possibly the only way. He looked back at his rangers, at Jon Snow with his white wolf, at the wildling girl Ygritte, watching everything with those fierce grey eyes the watch needs. Eyes inside Mance's army, Qhorin thought. Someone who can report on numbers, positions, intentions. Someone the wildlings would believe has turned. Someone young. Someone with a famous name. Someone whose betrayal would be convincing. Someone with a direwolf, because wildlings respected the old gods made flesh. The mathematics of survival were becoming clear. Qhorin had spent 20 years learning to read them, and right now they said that 9 men would die here, unless 1 man appeared to betray them. He looked at Jon Snow and began to plan. The day wore on. The wildlings tightened their circle. Qhorin's rangers prepared for the inevitable attack, checking weapons, rationing water, making peace with the gods in whatever way men facing death made peace. Jon Snow sat with Ghost, his face troubled. The boy knew something was wrong. He had good instincts, Qhorin had to admit. He sensed the shift in atmosphere, the way Qhorin kept looking at him with calculating eyes. As the sun began to set, Qhorin called Jon aside. "Walk with me," he said. They moved to the far end of the canyon, out of earshot of the other rangers. Ghost followed, silent as shadow. "You're going to die tomorrow," Qhorin said without preamble. Jon stiffened. "We all are." "No," Qhorin said, "you're not, because I'm going to give you a choice." "What choice?" Jon asked warily. Qhorin looked at the boy, really looked at him. 16 years old. Ned Stark's bastard. Lord Commander's steward. A boy who wanted to matter, who wanted to prove he was more than his birth. A boy who could save the Night's Watch if he was willing to pay the price. "The Watch needs someone inside Mance's army," Qhorin said quietly. "Someone who can report on their numbers, their plans, their movements. Someone who can get close to Mance himself." Jon's eyes widened. "You want me to..." "I want you to appear to turn your cloak," Qhorin said. "To make the wildlings believe you've betrayed the Watch. To get close enough to Mance to learn everything we need to know." "That's insane," Jon breathed. "They'd never believe They'd believe it if you killed me," Qhorin said. The words hung in the cold air between them. John stared at Qhorin like he had grown a second head. "What?" "Kill the Halfhand," Qhorin said, "in front of Rattleshirt and his wildlings. Make it look real. They'll take you to Manse. They'll believe you've turned, because no crow would kill Qhorin Halfhand unless he meant it." "I can't—" John's voice cracked. "I won't murder you to save myself." "You won't be saving yourself," Qhorin interrupted. "You'll be saving the Watch. Maybe saving the realm." He gripped John's shoulder. "The Great Ranging is going to fail. I can feel it in my bones. Too many wildlings, too few rangers, and something worse coming from the north. When it fails, the Watch will need intelligence. We'll need to know what Mance is planning, how many people he's leading, where the real threat lies." "There has to be another way," John said desperately. "There isn't." Qhorin's voice was iron. "This is the mathematics of survival, Snow. 9 rangers die tomorrow and the Watch learns nothing. Or 1 ranger dies, 1 ranger infiltrates the enemy, and maybe, just maybe, we get the information we need to survive what's coming." John pulled away, pacing, his hand on Ghost's fur. The direwolf watched Qhorin with those unsettling red eyes. "Why me?" John asked finally. "Why not Stone Snake or Eben or—" "Because you're Ned Stark's son," Qhorin said. "Because the wildlings respect your bloodline, your wolf, your connection to the old gods. Because you're young enough that they'll believe you might break under pressure." He moved closer. "And because you're the only one here who can do this and still sleep at night." "Sleep?" John's laugh was bitter. "You think I'll sleep after killing you?" "No," Qhorin admitted, "but you'll live. And living with guilt is better than dying with a clean conscience. At least when you're living, you can still do something useful." John stared at him for a long moment. Qhorin could see the conflict in those grey eyes, honour warring with duty, the lessons of Ned Stark fighting against the brutal reality of the world. "I need to think," John said finally. "You have until dawn," Qhorin said. "After that, the wildlings attack and we all die anyway." He started to walk away, then stopped. "John, this isn't about glory or heroism. This is about doing what needs doing, even when it costs everything. That's what the vows really mean. That's what being a ranger truly is." He left John standing alone in the gathering darkness, one hand on his wolf, the weight of an impossible choice settling onto shoulders too young to bear it. But youth didn't matter. The cold didn't care how old you were. The mathematics didn't change based on feelings. Either Jon Snow would understand that by morning, or they would all die as brothers in the cold. Qhorin suspected the boy would understand. He had his father's blood, after all. And Ned Stark had understood duty when it mattered most, even when duty meant losing your head. Dawn came with screaming. Qhorin woke to the sound of wildlings howling their war cries, the clash of steel on steel, and Eben's voice shouting warnings. He rolled from his blanket, sword already in his maimed hand, and took in the situation with the cold clarity of a man who had expected this. The wildlings were attacking from both ends of the canyon. 40 men, maybe 50, pouring through the narrow gaps like water through a broken dam. Rattleshirt had grown tired of waiting. "Form up," Qhorin shouted. "Back to back, tight formation." His rangers moved with practiced efficiency. 8 men forming a circle, weapons out, facing outward. Jon Snow stumbled into position beside Stone Snake, his sword gleaming in the pale light. Ghost materialized from the shadows, fangs bared, a white demon ready to kill. The first wildlings reached them. Eben's twin axes sang, taking a man's head clean off. Stone Snake's blade found a throat. Blood sprayed across snow, steaming in the cold. Qhorin fought with the precision of 20 years beyond the wall. His maimed hand limited him. He couldn't grip like a whole man could, but he had learned to fight with what remained, learned to turn weakness into unexpected strength. A wildling came at him with a spear. Qhorin caught the shaft, yanked the man forward, drove his blade through the gap in bone armor. The wildling fell, gurgling. "They're trying to separate us," Squire Dalbridge shouted. He was right. The wildlings weren't just attacking. They were herding, pushing Qhorin's rangers apart, isolating them. Basic tactics, effective ones. "Hold the line," Qhorin ordered, but even as he said it, he knew it was futile. Too many wildlings, too few rangers. The mathematics were brutal and simple. A spear grazed Qhorin's side, drawing blood. He killed the thrower, but 2 more wildlings took his place. The circle was breaking. In moments, they would be scattered across the canyon, cut down one by one. Then Ghost attacked. The direwolf was a white blur of fur and fury. He took a wildling by the throat, shook him like a ragdoll, dropped the corpse, and moved to the next target. The wildling screamed, not in pain, but in terror. They knew what a direwolf was, old gods made flesh, death in animal form. "Fall back to the south entrance," Qhorin shouted. If they could funnel the wildlings through a narrow space, they might last longer. Minutes instead of seconds. Not enough to win, but enough to die properly. They fought their way backward. Eben went down, an arrow through his leg. Stone Snake dragged him up, half carrying the wounded ranger. Blood stained the snow, mostly wildling, but ranger blood too. They were dying, just slower than the enemy. Qhorin reached the narrow gap at the canyon's south end. He turned to make a stand, and found Rattleshirt waiting. The wildling leader stood, with 20 men at his back, blocking the only escape route. He held a sword made from scavenged steel, notched and ugly, but deadly enough. "Trapped crow," Rattleshirt said. His skull-face armor made him look like death itself. "Nowhere left to run." Qhorin said nothing. He was breathing hard, blood running down his side. Around him his rangers formed up again, 7 men now. Where was the 8th? Jon Snow stood apart, near the prisoners. Ygritte watched him with those fierce grey eyes. The other wildling prisoners had broken free in the chaos, or been freed. They stood with their own people now, weapons in hand. "Last chance," Rattleshirt called. "Throw down your swords, bend the knee to Mance, or die here like fools." Qhorin looked at his rangers, at Stone Snake, bleeding from a dozen cuts, at Squire Dalbridge, his sword broken halfway down the blade, at the others, wounded and exhausted, but still standing. Good men, hard men, men who would die before breaking their vows. But their deaths would accomplish nothing. Just 7 more corpses in the snow. 7 more names Lord Commander Mormont would read at evening assembly. Unless... Qhorin caught Jon Snow's eyes across the canyon. The boy looked haunted, terrified. But beneath the fear, Qhorin saw understanding. Jon had made his choice. Now Qhorin had to give him the opportunity to follow through. "I'll take your offer," Qhorin said suddenly. The canyon fell silent. His rangers stared at him in shock. Rattleshirt's bone armor creaked as he stepped forward. "What?" "Your offer," Qhorin repeated. He lowered his sword. "I'll bend the knee. I'll swear to Mance. But my men go free. That's the price." "Halfhand, no!" Stone Snake's voice was anguished. "You can't—" "I can do whatever keeps you alive," Qhorin snapped. He looked back at Rattleshirt. "Well, is it a deal?" Rattleshirt studied him with narrowed eyes, trying to see the trick, trying to understand why the legendary Halfhand would break his vows. "Why should I trust a crow who turns his cloak?" Rattleshirt asked. "Because I'm tired," Qhorin said. And there was truth in that, at least. 20 years of cold and death and impossible choices. 20 years of counting the dead. Tired of fighting a war we can't win. Tired of watching good men die for nothing. Tired of serving a realm that doesn't even know we exist. He could feel his rangers' eyes on him, could feel their shock, their disgust, their confusion. They didn't understand, couldn't understand. Not yet. But Jon Snow understood. The boy's hand had moved to his sword hilt. "You're lying," Rattleshirt said. "The Halfhand doesn't break. Everyone knows that." "Everyone's wrong," Qhorin said. He took a step forward. "I'm just a man, and men break when they've been bent long enough." "Traitor!" Jon Snow's voice rang out across the canyon. "You oath-breaking coward!" Qhorin turned slowly. Jon stood with his sword drawn, his face twisted with fury. Ghost growled at his side. "Stand down, Snow," Qhorin said quietly. "No!" Jon's voice cracked with emotion. "You swore vows. You swore to defend the wall. You can't just—" "I can do whatever I want," Qhorin interrupted. His voice turned harsh, cruel. "And you can't stop me, boy. You're nothing. A bastard playing at being a ranger. Your father's shame made flesh." He saw Jon flinch, saw the words hit home. Good. The boy needed to be angry, needed to be furious enough to do what came next. "My father had more honor in his little finger than you have in your whole body," Jon said, his voice shaking. "Your father's honor got him killed," Qhorin spat. "Got his head put on a spike, left you without a name or a place in the world. That's what honor gets you, Snow. That's what the vows get you. A cold death and a forgotten name." "You're wrong," Jon said. "Am I?" Qhorin moved closer. "Look around you, boy. We're surrounded. We're dying. And for what? For a wall? For vows that mean nothing to anyone but us?" He gestured at the sea, wildlings. "They're the free folk. They live how they want, go where they want. They're not slaves to a piece of ice." "We're not slaves," Jon said. "We're brothers. We're the shield that—" "The shield is broken," Qhorin roared. "Can't you see that? The Watch is dying. The realm is abandoning us. There's no glory here, no honor, just cold and death and more cold." He advanced on Jon, his sword still sheathed. "But I'm done with it. Done dying for people who don't care. I'm going to live, Snow. I'm going to survive. And if that means bending the knee to Mance, then that's what I'll do." Jon's knuckles were white on his sword hilt. Qhorin could see the boy warring with himself, wanting to believe his mentor hadn't just turned his cloak, wanting to believe there was some deeper plan. There was. But Jon needed to not think about it, needed to act on instinct and rage. "Draw your sword," Jon said quietly. "No," Qhorin said. "I'm done fighting, especially against children." "Draw your sword," Jon repeated, louder now. "Make me bastard." Jon attacked. The boy came at him in a rush, sword high, his form textbook perfect. Some master-at-arms had trained him well. Probably Winterfell's master, teaching the Lord's bastard to fight like a true knight. Qhorin drew his sword in time to parry. Steel rang against steel. The wildlings watched, howling encouragement. Rattleshirt had stepped back, letting this play out. The other rangers were being held back by wildling spears. "You're making a mistake, Snow," Qhorin said. He fought defensively, giving ground. "I'm better than you, faster, more experienced." "Then prove it," Jon snarled. They circled each other. Qhorin watched the boy's footwork, his stance, the way he gripped his blade. Good technique. But technique wasn't enough. Jon needed something more. He needed Ghost. "Your wolf can't save you," Qhorin said, loud enough for the wildlings to hear. "Can't save your honor, can't save your precious vows." Ghost growled, a sound like thunder. The direwolf's red eyes fixed on Qhorin with predatory focus. "He knows what you are," Jon said. "He can smell the betrayal on you." "Then he's smarter than you," Qhorin said. He lunged, testing Jon's defense. The boy parried well, riposted. Qhorin knocked the blade aside. "You still think this is about honor, about right and wrong. But it's just about surviving, Snow. That's all it's ever been about." "You're wrong," Jon said. But there was doubt in his voice now. Doubt and confusion, and the terrible suspicion that maybe, just maybe, Qhorin was right. They fought harder now. Qhorin pressed the attack, driving Jon backward. He was careful. Couldn't be too skilled, or the wildlings would know it was staged. But he couldn't be too weak, or Jon would hesitate at the critical moment. The balance was everything. The performance had to be perfect. "You know nothing, Jon Snow," Qhorin said. It was something Ygritte had said earlier, mocking the boy. The words seemed to strike, deeper than any blade. "You came to the wall thinking you'd find purpose, find brotherhood, find a place to belong." He rained blows down on Jon's defense. "But you found nothing. You're still a bastard, still unwanted, still searching for something to make your life mean something." "Shut up!" Jon's strikes became wilder, more emotional. "Good. You'll never be a Stark," Qhorin continued. "Never be anything but Ned's shame. Your brother's sitting in Winterfell right now, warming himself by fires you'll never see. Your sisters are somewhere in the south, living lives that don't include you. And you're here, dying in the cold, for vows that mean nothing." "I said shut up." Jon attacked with real fury now. Ghost leapt forward at the same moment, going for Qhorin's legs. It was the opening he had been waiting for. Qhorin stumbled, going down on one knee. Jon's blade came around in a perfect arc. In that moment, Qhorin met the boy's eyes, saw the confusion there, the horror, the realization that he was about to kill his mentor. And beneath that, the understanding, the terrible, crushing understanding of what Qhorin had done, why he had done it. Qhorin gave Jon the smallest nod, so small the wildlings wouldn't see, just an acknowledgement, a permission. "Do it," that nod said. "Do what needs doing." Jon's blade hesitated for one heartbeat. Then it struck. Pain exploded through Qhorin's chest. Jon's sword had found the gap in his furs, driven deep into flesh and lung. Qhorin felt his legs give out, felt himself falling. The snow was cold against his back, blood filled his mouth. He coughed, and more blood came. Above him, Jon Snow stood frozen, his sword red with Qhorin's life. The boy's face was white with shock. He looked like he might be sick. Qhorin tried to speak, but only blood came out. He tried again, forcing words through the pain. "You know, nothing. Jon Snow." The words came out as a curse. The wildlings heard it that way. Jon heard it that way too. But underneath, there was something else. A blessing. A final lesson. "You know nothing yet," Qhorin thought, as the cold began to take him. "But you'll learn. You'll learn what duty really means, what sacrifice costs. You'll learn to make the hard choices and live with them after. You'll learn what I learned. And maybe that knowledge will save the watch. The sky above was grey. Snow was falling. When had that started?" Qhorin watched the flakes drift down, felt them land on his face. Cold, Everything was cold. But he had been cold for 20 years. This was just more of the same. He thought of all the men he had lost, all the choices he had made, all the ghosts he carried. Soon he would join them. Soon he would be just another name Lord Commander Mormont read at evening assembly. But Jon would live. Jon would get close to Mance. Jon would learn what the wildlings knew about the others, about the threat from the north. Jon would report back, somehow, and that information might be enough to save the Watch, might be enough to save the realm. The mathematics balanced. One life for many, one ranger's honor for the Watch's survival. Qhorin Halfhand had spent 20 years making those calculations. This was just the final one. "Take him to Mance," Rattleshirt's voice, distant and hollow. "The crow who killed the Half-Hand, the king beyond the wall, will want to see this." Hands grabbed Jon, pulling him away. Qhorin heard the boy struggling, heard Ghost snarling. Then the sounds faded. Stone Snake's face appeared above him. The younger ranger's eyes were wet. "Half-Hand," Stone Snake whispered. "Why?" Qhorin tried to answer, but the cold was too deep now, too final. His lips moved, forming words Stone Snake would never hear. Because someone had to. Because the Watch needs to survive. Because this is what duty means. Stone Snake would understand eventually. Or he wouldn't. Either way, Qhorin had done what needed doing. He always had. The snow kept falling. The cold kept taking. And Qhorin Halfhand, the greatest ranger the Night's Watch had known in a generation, died in the snow with blood on his lips and duty in his heart. They built him a cairn. Rattleshirt allowed it, a courtesy to a worthy enemy. Stone Snake and the surviving rangers piled stones over Qhorin's body while the wildlings watched. No words were spoken. The Night's Watch had no prayers for the dead, only vows for the living. But Stone Snake spoke anyway. "He was the best of us," the ranger said quietly. "He did what needed doing, always, even when it cost him everything." The other rangers nodded. They didn't understand yet, didn't know why Qhorin had turned on Jon Snow, but they would figure it out. Eventually. Jon Snow stood apart, under guard. Ygritte watched him with something like respect. The boy's face was still white, his hands still shaking. He looked like a man who had just discovered what duty truly cost. Good, Qhorin would have thought if he were still alive to think. The boy needed that lesson. The cairn was finished. The rangers were allowed to leave. Rattleshirt kept his word about that much. They would return to the Night's Watch, report Qhorin's betrayal and Jon's murder of the Half-Hand. Some would believe it, some wouldn't. But it didn't matter what they believed. What mattered was that Jon Snow now had a reason to be trusted by the wildlings, had a story that would get him close to Mance Rayder, had a mission that might save them all. As the rangers departed and the wildlings prepared to move, snow began to fall more heavily. It covered Qhorin's cairn, covered the blood in the canyon, covered everything in white. Winter was coming. The others were coming. The long night was returning. But the Night's Watch would endure, because one ranger had made the final sacrifice, because one boy had learned the hardest lesson, because duty mattered more than honor, survival mattered more than pride, and sometimes the greatest heroes were the ones who died with their names cursed, their legacies tarnished, their sacrifices unknown. Qhorin Halfhand had understood that, had lived it for 20 years, and in the end had died for it. The snow kept falling on the Frostfangs, the wind kept howling, and somewhere beyond the wall, Jon Snow rode toward his destiny, carrying the greatest ranger's final mission. The mathematics of survival had claimed their payment, but they had also provided a chance. One desperate, terrible chance. It would have to be enough. Epilogue Castle Black, 3 weeks later. Meister Aemon sat in his chambers, blind eyes staring at nothing, while a younger brother read him the report from the Great Ranging. Jon Snow of House Stark killed Qhorin Halfhand in single combat, and has been taken captive by the wildlings. Qhorin Halfhand attempted to turn his cloak and join Mance Rayder. Jon Snow stopped him. The Halfhand died a traitor's death. Aemon held up one ancient hand. That's enough. The younger brother stopped reading. Master, the report continues. I said that's enough. Aemon's blind eyes glistened. Leave me. I wish to be alone. When the brother had gone, Aemon sat in the darkness of his blindness and thought about Qhorin Halfhand. The ranger had visited him once, years ago, asked questions about the long night, about the others, about ancient weapons and prophecies. Why do you want to know this? Aemon had asked. Because knowledge is survival, Qhorin had said, and we're going to need every scrap of both before this is over. Now Qhorin was dead, died a traitor's death, according to the report. But Aemon was old enough to read between lines that younger men could not see, old enough to understand sacrifice when he saw it. You gave him to them, Aemon whispered to the empty room, gave Jon Snow a mission, gave him a reason to be trusted. He shook his head, and bought it with your life and your honor. No one would ever know the truth, no one except perhaps Jon Snow himself, carrying the weight of that knowledge north. Aemon reached for a bell, summoned a steward. When the young man arrived, Aemon spoke clearly. Send a raven to the Shadow Tower. Tell them to add Qhorin Halfhand's name to the roll of honor. Tell them he died doing his duty to the Night's Watch. Nothing more. But Meister, the report says he turned traitor. The report, Aemon said coldly, says what Qhorin Halfhand wanted it to say. Do as I command. The steward fled. Aemon sat alone again in his darkness. The greatest ranger the Watch has known, he said to the empty air, and no one will ever know how great, but the Watch will stand, because of you, because you understood what we all must learn eventually. He paused. That duty is heavier than mountains, and lighter than death. Outside, the wind blew cold from the north. The wall stood silent. And somewhere beyond it, Jon Snow carried the last mission of Qhorin Halfhand into the heart of the enemy camp. Winter was coming. But the nights, Watch endured. It always had. It always would. Because rangers like Qhorin Halfhand had made it so.